I'll bring you both in on the ABC issue, but I'll start with you, David. Just on the back of that discussion I had with you and Hannon, Workplace Relations Editor for The Australian, it is very telling, isn't it, that you've got the big unions now, the Workers' Union and the CFMEU, wanting to have a rational debate about an energy mix. They want to see part coal, a debate about nuclear, and they obviously support renewables. It's not an either-or proposition, as Anthony Albanese might make us believe.
I think it's a reflection of the new reality that Labor finds itself in post-election, and one they're grappling to make changes on. Essentially, Labor's policy really was in this area to dud their own union members. And so the union is trying to lead them back into a place where they can have a debate about it. The problem for the Labor Party on this is that they need to move right in places like Queensland that have coal seats and a lot of mining. And they know that if they go that direction, they lose votes on the left to Greens. So what they're trying to encourage, I would imagine, by having the unions leading the debate in this area, is trying to buy their way back into a place where they've got respectability among their members who were in those coal mining jobs, who felt extremely disenfranchised by the party before the last election.
Yeah, look, and as Stephen Conroy has pointed out here on this program, this is very much what happened to the coal mining towns that his family grew up in the north of England, and they were abandoned by Labor, and then they turned around and voted Labor out in a landslide to Boris Johnson. I want to get into the ABC reader, your favourite topic. For my sins a long time ago, I was a chief of staff to a communications minister, and I worked for Richard Alston as a broadcasting advisor, so I know the budget line and the sort of the structural back end of the ABC bureaucracy. But it's sort of, you know, $1 billion a year, and such a small amount of Australians watch it or consume its product. It's virtually irrelevant to, you know, a good 2/3 of Australians. Do they deserve more money?
No, they don't deserve more money. This is an environment where commercial operators have had to tighten their belts dramatically, and they are whining about a 1% cut or a 2% cut when you look at the enormous cuts any major newspaper has made to their staffing to try to streamline things to remain profitable and sustainable. They live in their own little world. And for a coalition government to be every year forking out $1 billion plus to the Greens propaganda arm, to me just seems like madness. This is an issue that the coalition has never had the guts to tackle properly. It's in their charter that they're supposed to be balanced. It's in their charter that they're supposed to serve all Australians, not the 50% who lean left. And they have failed to do that. And I think they're vital in regional areas where some of the commercial operators don't want to be in because it's not viable. But in the crowded markets, in the CBDs and big cities of Australia, they need to justify their existence.
A long time ago in Britain, David Gazzard, the BBC took a lot of its producing and administrative top-heavy layers and put them into, you know, the Birminghams and the Bristols and decentralised. One of the big complaints about the ABC is the weight of staff located in inner-city Sydney and Ultimo, and also the, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in top-heavy salaries. I don't hold anything against the cameramen and the people that are on the sort of entry-level journalistic wages and out in the regional areas, but by God, they have some big salaries of people that do bugger all in Sydney.
Well, it's, you know, I mean, that's reflected by what they say themselves. I've just recently had a love-in in Blacktown, I think it was, to sort of say we're reconnecting with other areas than Ultimo. The one thing I would add to what Rita said, because she made some interesting points about commercial broadcasters having to cut their cloth to new commercial realities. The ABC has expanded from its initial remit, and it's now got multiple TV stations, multiple radio stations. It's eating the lunch of commercial providers in the digital space. And so it's become a behemoth that now, you know, every time it's convenient, it says it's going to have to cut back services. And it's doing it at a time where it's saying we need more funding because we've got to manage emergencies better and report on emergencies better, which I would have thought would have been sort of its core raison d'etre, as it were, sort of its core job. So the idea that they've expanded so dramatically and are now seeking extra money when they're eating the lunch of all the commercial providers, I think, is a bit rich.
Yeah, look, and you're right. Emergency warnings and other things are its core business, but it's sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and they're using this as an excuse, David, to come in and knock on the Prime Minister's door and have him over the barrel, because it's been a tough summer for parts of the coalition, certainly in relation to bushfires, and lift the ask right at the time their triennial bid's going in.
I think, you know, I mean, it's well within Paul Fletcher, who runs the communications portfolio, to say to them, well, you've got to demonstrate how, you know, doing your day job and covering emergencies means it's costing more, and that you've looked internally for that budget. But it's a sort of a time-honoured tradition, isn't it, to say, well, if we don't get a budget increase, we'll cut back on, in this case, emergency services, or it's usually sport, or it's usually children's programming. So, you know, this is a well-worn path in the past.
Yeah, look, we can read that script every single time.
It is so cynical, though, isn't it, to say that the most vital task they perform, that's at risk. All this other nonsense that is superfluous, we can't possibly cut services there, but something that actually goes towards informing people at times of emergency, that's what we're going to... I mean, give me a break. I just think Aisha Butt-Rose has been an absolute failure in this role. It's coming up to her one-year anniversary. I have little faith in the Communications Minister in holding the ABC honest. I think he's weak. He hasn't been certainly outspoken about this, and behind the scenes I haven't heard him about agitating to do anything meaningful. So I think they're just going to keep handing over $1 billion plus cheques every year and get slammed for it day in and day out.
Yeah, I think you have to go back to put a Conservative in there. Richard Alston at least went hard on the ABC all those years ago at the start of the Howard years, but ever since you put moderates in there, Malcolm Turnbull, now Paul Fletcher, you know, they just agree, Rita, they just agree. David, I want to go to another issue. There's long been this re-emergence of a debate about whether or not people should be assessed for both the pension and now, news today, assessed for aged care services based on the family home being included in any assessment. Now, this doesn't go away. It's come back again. Catholic Health Australia is making the call now. Are we getting to a point where that's going to now be a debate that we will look at whether or not the family home's included?
I think we probably will. That's my honest answer, because the budget in relation to aged care and health and so on is really, really strained, and we're an ageing population. That said, there has to be an accommodation, I think. You know, the consistent approach has been to means test various things, so people should expect that coming down the path. But I would also make the point that if you are a person that has retired with more money, the chances are you've paid a lot more tax through your lifetime. So the idea that you should be stung in retirement for more probably sits uneasily with the amount of tax they've already contributed to their own health with private health through their lifetimes. The other thing I would say is that it's always going to be a point around how much you value the assets test with the family home, and that is always going to be a point of contention at the bottom end to say, well, the rich people need to contribute more to their own retirement after paying all that tax. So that's probably the area where this is going to lie, I think, at the end of the day, is where the assets test kicks in with your family home to fund these sorts of things.